Welcome to an intro to Byzantine music and chant. In this course, we will be covering the basics of the art of Byzantine music. We're going to learn how to read and chant the music, and hopefully by the end of it, you'll be able to tackle some simple hymns of the church. This course is designed, as the name suggests, to be an intro. So I'd open by saying that if you're serious about really diving into this form of music and embracing it, I'd highly recommend that you attend the regular weekly church services and join the chanter at the chanting stand for them. This is truly the best way to create a foundation for yourself to continue chanting for years to come. So with that, let's begin. What is Byzantine music? It is the traditional music of the Greek Orthodox Church. It has its roots in the music of ancient Greece and the Levant. It complements and enhances the liturgical texts by using various modes or tones, styles, and interpretations of the musical scale that are unique to this Eastern style of music. The early church fathers adopted Byzantine music as the musical genre they believed was most conducive to prayer. This was the musical genre the hymnographers intended when they composed the hymns we still chant today. Why is Byzantine music chanted? When done properly, Byzantine music simultaneously expresses the sadness and joy of the human condition. We are sad because of the presence and effects of sin that alienate us from God, but joyful that Jesus Christ has come and remains to heal us from sins and save us from death. When is Byzantine music chanted? There are 8 daily worship services in the Orthodox Church, 9 if we include the Divine Liturgy. These are midnight service, orthros, 1st, 3rd, 6th, and 9th hours, the Vesper service, and the Compline service. Additionally, other services are seasonal, or special occasions, prayed in times of need, and of course there are the sacraments, baptisms, weddings, holy unction. Now 3 of the 8 daily worship services are commonly conducted in parishes. These are Vespers, Orthros, and the Divine Liturgy. Now each service has its own set of prayers and hymns that are chanted according to the traditional order, or taxis in Greek, designated by the Ecumenical Patriarchate in Constantinople. Each service contains fixed elements, and by elements I mean prayers and hymns, that are always present and remain unchanged. And each service also contains hymns particular to a specific day, to a specific feast or season of the liturgical calendar. So there are literally thousands of hymns. Who chants Byzantine music? The psalti is the Greek name for the chanter. Usually a church has a protopsalti, or a first chanter, who is the most advanced in the knowledge and execution of Byzantine music. The second-ranking chanter is known as the labadarios. And the isokrati is the person or group of people, they would be referred to as the isokrates, at the chanting stand who holds ison. Now ison is the single droned note that accompanies the melody, and it's actually the only polyphonic aspect of the music. Byzantine music can be chanted by 1, 2, 3, or even a choir of chanters in isokrates. Where is Byzantine music chanted? The chanting stand in the church is called the analogion in Greek. There usually are 2 chanting stands for 2 Byzantine choirs, which chant the hymns or responses to the priest of the services back and forth, or antiphonally. These chanting stands are located on the church's solea, precisely to the right and left of the icon screen. Now, the proximity of the chanting stands to the altar is crucial, as it is very important for the priest and the chanters to be able to communicate easily, often with visual cues during the service. How is Byzantine music chanted? And this is the meat of our discussion. Byzantine music is comprised of 8 tones. Now, the tone provides a framework for the melody, like a key or a mode in Western music. Each tone is defined by its bass note or tonal center, its specific melodic formulas or patterns that give rise to other dominating notes from the scale, and its spiritual character. Each tone has its own scale type, and we'll discuss this later. And the chanter will chant the melody, the melos, while the isokrati holds the ison. As we discussed, this is the single droned note. Now this note may alter between the bass note or other dominant notes depending on the tone. Now, before we continue on the tones, I'd like to discuss these two concepts, Byzantine iphos and Byzantine ethos. Now, in Orthodox tradition, music is a vessel for theology. He who sings prays twice. The purpose of ecclesiastical chant is not performance, but prayer and transformation. Chant is an extension of prayer. The iphos refers to the style of the voice while chanting. It's performative in nature. The ethos of Byzantine chant is shared with other types of secular music from the Eastern Mediterranean region. The ethos, on the other hand, refers to the spiritual mood, emotional tone, or moral character of the music. This is where the distinction between Byzantine ecclesiastical chant and secular Greek music lies. The ethos expresses the inner state of the text of the hymn. The melodic and rhythmic movements of the voice mirror the expression of the hymns being chanted, even down to the word. If the ethos belongs to the voice, then the ethos belongs to the heart. The ethos must serve the ethos. The external sound exists to make the inner meaning audible. Each of the 8 tones uses the Byzantine ethos in various ways. So let's look at the 8 tones of Byzantine music. First we have first tone. Its ethos is one of joyful brightness, triumphant, confident, and radiant. Second tone. It has an ethos that sounds like deep repentance mixed with sweetness, a tender sorrow full of yearning hope. Third tone. Its ethos is one of angelic majesty, noble, royal, and glorious, worthy of Christ the King. Fourth tone has an ethos that is one of contemplative peace and gladness, balanced, luminous, and with spiritual joy. Next we move to the fifth tone. However, the next 4 tones are not called 5 through 8. They actually go by this nomenclature. We use the word plagal, which means adjacent to or to the side of. So plagal first tone kind of has a similar sound to first tone, only it's maybe, if you will, taken to a different level. So plagal first tone has an ethos that is one of warm devotion and solemn depth, a mature joy, a humble reverence. Plagal second tone, it is one of mystical, introspective sadness. It's the voice of inner repentance. Now, it's not called plagal third tone. It's actually called varis, which translates to grave, the grave tone. And it is one of solemn strength. It is grounded in authority and awe, and it's also weighty and majestic. And finally, the last tone is plagal fourth tone. It is one of divine serenity. Its ethos is one of heavenly sweetness, tranquil joy, true transcendence. And I know that these are all just words, descriptions. It's kind of hard to understand what each of these means without actually hearing the tones themselves. So again, I'll circle back to the beginning. If you're really serious about diving into this form of music, you really, really need to be in attendance at church so that you can hear each of these executed, and you can ask the chanter questions. What is this? Why does this sound like this? What's going on here, for example? So why don't we talk a little bit about Byzantine tones and scales? I don't want to get too bogged down on theory just yet. We'll be discussing it more later. So as we mentioned, there are 8 tones in Byzantine music. There are 4 scales in Byzantine music, or scale types, if you will. And each of the 8 tones uses one of the 4 scales. So each musical scale is constructed by the interval system. What do I mean by that? I mean the system of spacings between each note of that scale. So some tones may use the same scale as others. And each tone has a bass note, as well as other predominating notes that the melody line will tend to favor. This helps draw the distinction between two tones that are using the same scale. So it's important. Each of the 8 tones uses one of the 4 scales, Each musical scale is constructed by the interval system, or system of spacings between each note of that scale, as I said. And the system of spacings between each note, or the interval, is unique for each type of the four scales. So why don't we talk a little bit about the four types of Byzantine scales? We have the diatonic scale. It's the one we're going to be gaining the most practice with early on. And tones 1, plagal 1, 4, and plagal 4 mainly use this scale, with a few exceptions. Its sound is more natural and open, which is why we'll be beginning with it. And it also slightly resembles the standard major and minor system of Western music, another reason why we'll be starting with it. It has a stable, bright, and balanced feel. Our next two types of Byzantine scales are in the family called chromatic scales. And you have the soft chromatic scale and the hard chromatic scale, and they are used by tones 2 and plagal 2, mostly respectively, but again with a few exceptions. Now the chromatic scales are characterized by compressed intervals. So notes are closer together, and this results in a sequence of very small leaps between notes, but also very large leaps, because you have to make up for that space elsewhere in the scale. So this tends to have a more distinct Eastern sound compared to Western music as a result of this intervaling that we're doing. Its sound is more emotional and colorful. That's actually where we get the word chromatic from. Chroma in Greek, chromatic, means color. Finally, we have the enharmonic scale, used by tones 3 and varis. It most resembles the major scale in Western music. However, the melodic movements are a bit more ancient. It can have almost an ethereal quality. It's very rich and solemn, kind of a mystical sound. Again, these are best executed and exemplified through practice and through execution, through actually hearing hymns in each of these tones that are using these scales. So again, the two chromatic scales, soft and hard, they're closely related in structure of scale, but they're used differently in practice. And again, this will be more clear later on. So here is the Byzantine scale. I know we talked about the four types of scales, but again, that refers to the spacing between the notes. These themselves are the notes. We have ni, pa, vu, ra, vi, ke, zo, ni. Finally, the octave. It is very important to memorize this scale. So like I said, each tone uses this scale in different ways. Each tone may have a different tonal center, meaning the note itself would be the center or the base note for that tone. Depending on what tone you're in, they'll use a different note, perhaps. And each tone may use a different scale type, as we recently just discussed. So what do I mean by scale type? Again, scale type refers to the system of spacings between each note that helps define how melodies move within a tone. With a good understanding of how tones are structured and a solid grasp of the ephos and the ethos of Byzantine chant, a chanter may learn how to move properly within a tone, where to rest, where and how to emphasize, and how to approach cadences. So why don't we do a little comparison here between Western music. So here we have the Byzantine scale. Ni pavuga di kezoni, ni zoike di gavupani. There you go. It's actually the same sequence of notes, even though the spacings may be different between the notes, between West and East, as the solfege scale that most people are familiar with. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And an additional comparison, we have the actual letter named notes from Western music. And like I said, the scale is super important to memorize. So here's a good little assignment that you can work on at home, starting from different points on the scale, going up and back down. So here we have the traditional setup, ni pavu gadi kezoni, ni zokedi gavu pani. And you can just recite them. You don't even have to sing them. What you're really doing is just cementing in the order of these notes, where they appear on the scale, and what comes next. Pavu gadi kezoni pa, pa ni zokedi gavu pa. Vu gadi kezoni pavu, vu pa ni zokedi gavu. Keep practicing, going down, up and down the scale. So, the Byzantine scale, yes, very important for us to memorize this before we go any further. So we'll revisit the theory behind the tones and the scales after we've tackled notation and Byzantine characters. So for our practice with learning notation, we will be using the diatonic version of the scale while doing the exercises. It's the simplest to deal with right off the bat. Stop before going on to the next video. Before we can begin to learn notation, this scale must be memorized. So go back to the last slide and do some of those exercises before we continue to learn some of the notation. It's going to be integral because we're going to be using a method known as paralayi for these exercises, in which we'll actually be reciting the names of the notes as we hit them. So it's going to be very important for you to memorize this Byzantine scale before continuing. Thank you.